Hi, everybody. My name is Beth Gill, and I am talking to you right now from Ridgewood, Queens, my apartment. My husband's cooking dinner in the kitchen. You can hear it
Wonderful.
sizzling.
Yeah, I love that. Harriet.
Hi, I'm Harriet, the Harriet of Reid and Harriet, and I'm here in Cypress, California, tuning in.
Wonderful. And you're you're at your parents' house?
I'm at my parents', yep.
I love that. I am at my aunt's guest house in Venice, California. So Harriet and I are West Coast. I'm Reid, and I work with Harriet. And we once worked with you, Beth, one time, and we're going to again, as it turns out, coming up.
I loved that.
Me too.
It was great.
I love
We'll get to it. Don't tell. We'll get to it later. But we're all meant to work together on a show that should be happening this week, but it's not for obvious reasons. But Beth, why don't you explain a little bit about your body of work and how you came to be introduced to Sara?
Okay. Talking about my body of work is one of my most hated things to do. So thank you for starting there.
You're so welcome.
I understand.
It's like my body of work. I have been working as an independent choreographer in New York City from, I don't know, 2005. And I think that while there are certain pretty clear, I think, like core values and interests that kind of run through the body of work, I also think that to sort of look at it as a whole, there's been like a lot of change and a lot of transformation. Kind of where I started was in a space that was really like a very kind of like anti-dance sort of space. Bodies really being used to almost like objects in space, these kind of like live installations and sculptures, very, very sparse, minimal, slow, still events. And then there was kind of a progression where I was sort of falling more back in love with dance in terms of movement and complexity in the body. And I feel like that trajectory has kind of continued, and then kind of off of it, there's been these other like paths and interests that have happened. And now I feel like my work is in a place where I'm really interested in like a kind of multiplicity of perspectives and materiality, and I think aesthetics, although I'm sure like my capacity is still like I'm sure ultimately I'm still in somewhat of a narrow frame, but I'm kind of interested in juxtaposition and the juxtaposition of a lot of different things right now, and narrative is something that I'm thinking about a lot. I feel like maybe in the past 4 or 5 years, I've been just kind of thinking about abstraction and like moving away from abstraction and what does that mean? How's that?
I mean, tremendous. It was both vague and it gave us a lot to deal with, which is great. And then I guess I'm being the moderator because I pushed record.
Thank you.
You have like a pencil. And
I do. I have a pen. I'm writing words. I wrote down multiplicity, juxtaposition. But Harriet, will you tell the viewers a little bit about, well, maybe about yourself and then about how Reid and Harriet Design came to be?
So Reid and I met at the Fashion Institute of Technology in 2009. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
We were both evening weekend students, adult students, because I had already completed a degree in molecular cell biology at Berkeley. Reid had a career as a dancer and was still dancing. And so we met in this evening weekend fashion design program at FIT. And I think we were drawn to each other's work and aesthetic. And we just continued to be in touch, be in conversation about our ideas in terms of clothing, fashion, how much we don't like fashion. And that led to Reid being approached by some friends and choreographers to create costumes, and you approached me to collaborate on those little projects. And that just blew up, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and so we've been designing together since 2011.
Yeah, so we got this we had this same fashion education, which both like gave us all these skills and in a way led us away from fashion, which was interesting. I mean, Harriet, you worked in fashion for a time.
Yeah,
what was that?
Yeah, I worked in fashion for three and a half years, because that was my goal, moving to New York from California, going to school. That was the goal. And so I very much wanted to do that. So I did do that for a few years. And but because I was working in dance with you on the side also, I was just drawn to that much more. There was more freedom compared to working in women's wear for a designer.
Right. And what I've over the years really come to feel in terms of solidifying this kind of like love and devotion towards what it is that we do. But I have in recent years felt very relieved in the end that I didn't do like the traditional route from FIT into the fashion industry, just because the fashion industry is really so capitalist and so problematic. And Harry and I have watched so many of our favorite small independent brands just vanish because in this like capitalist universe, there's no place for people to be able to make work and on a small scale. So we've been so lucky to find this niche where we can explore ideas on a very small scale and with support from a variety of different organizations like the Joyce Theater, where we've worked many times. So anyways, that's us. That's who we are, who I am. And Beth, why don't you talk, well, actually, yeah, Beth, why don't you talk a little bit about how you got connected to Sara, and then we'll talk about our connection to Sara.
Okay. I was invited by Aaron Maddox, artistic director of the Joyce Theater. And, or I guess I should say, before being invited, he sort of introduced me to the idea of the show. I think programming for the show had already begun, and Sara had already started to conceptualize what she wanted to do. And we didn't know each other. And I don't think Sara was really familiar with my work prior to the introduction. And then Aaron put us in touch, and we got together at a coffee shop and kind of started the process of getting to know each other, and did a little preliminary work in a studio, I think kind of like, a first date. And then after that kind of committed to doing something with each other. And I think I was actually pregnant for those, like very pregnant for those first couple of rehearsals, which was fun.
Can you elaborate on what that first date was like?
What the first date was like? I was super nervous. And I came with only 2 different materials to kind of introduce and talk about. And we did a lot of talking. when we did when we met up at the coffee shop, I remember, I think I asked her something to the effect of, I was curious, like, what memories she has as a performer that have really stuck with her, moments where she felt very present, very alive inside of her performing. I might have used like slightly different language, but that was like kind of the gist of what I was going at. And she said a couple of things, and right now the thing that kind of started to lead me down a little rabbit hole is she talked about performing in diamonds. And on the way home that night, I remember doing a kind of, Google search, just like very general Google search on like diamonds, and found some ended up taking some screenshots of a filming that I think was done at, like a studio stage kind of setup where they had some sort of like wraparound psych. And I really I ended up falling kind of in love with the screenshots that I took and thinking about them and this strange sort of vantage point that they like kind of were setting up. And anyway, I think when I showed up at the studio, I ended up showing her those and starting to talk to her about some of the initial ideas and concepts that I was interested in, which I think at that point was really, I was thinking a lot about perception and about perspective. So like perspective, literally I was thinking about how we see what we see, and with this particular framing that's set up with like a proscenium stage, or like at the Joyce Theater, that particular stage, just literally like, how is the audience looking into this box of the stage? What could we do? What kind of interventions could we do in the space to really set up some other way of seeing? And how might I play with her and this one solitary body over the course of a solo to kind of continually shift and alter how we're seeing? And then thinking about perception, for me, there was a lot of considering the different dance worlds that we come from in taking on this proposal to work with Sara, and the ways that we would both have to kind of bridge some of the spaces between those worlds and what's interesting about that. And I think in particular, I was really interested, like, what are my sort of either correct or false perceptions about her going into this process? I'm sure the same for her. And maybe like, how is our idea of the performers that we are seeing always impacting our experiences of them on the stage? And kind of like, how much can I undo about what we know about Sara?
And had you seen Sara dance before?
Not live.
Oh, wow, interesting.
That's not true, actually, because I had seen Sara dance in Jody's piece, which was like the first
at the dance space platform.
Yes, the dance space platform where Jody Melnick made work on Sara.
And Sterling.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, because Sara was paired with Rashawn Mitchell.
Right.
And Jody was paired with Sterling. And then Sara ended up reaching out to Jody to continue that work.
Got it.
And I think that's been, there's this like very clear dichotomy, especially in New York, between like modern dance and ballet. And there's been times historically where that's been a little bit broken down, or there's been some effort to build a bridge. Like when Baryshnikov was director at ABT, he had David Gordon make a dance, and he had Twyla Tharp make dances, and Mark Morris and others. And when Balanchine was really first building up the New York City Ballet, he did collaboration with Martha Graham and Paul Taylor. And so like, there's been efforts along the way, but Sara, because of her platform as a ballerina, there seems to be this new, not very new, but the kind of notoriety that comes with being a ballerina gives you some curatorial power now, because organizations can count on you bringing people in to see the show. And Sara has done a really, really good job of reaching out to people really from a different universe of dance, of being very adventurous in that way, and not just looking towards kind of conventional collaborations that you might expect from ballet dancers. So I think it's like a really amazing choice that she come to you, because it's both very far away from, but also related to the kind of formalism that you see in Western concert dance like ballet, which, as we were talking about earlier, and we'll probably bring into this conversation, is like a very problematic form in a way, you know, like in its sort of colonialist beginnings, etc. So Harriet, before we get too much deeper into exactly what this project that we're all working on is, Harriet, will you talk a little bit about our experience with Sara as designers and how we've approached working with her?
Yeah, well, you were in touch and friends with her and knew her way earlier than I did, but I was introduced to her through, I believe, Justin Peck.
I don't think I knew her really before that.
Oh, really?
Mm-mm.
Well, I was introduced to her through, in person, through Justin for his work Bright Motion. But I knew you were always a fan of her, because I do remember you talking about her and telling me, you know, you have to see her dance. So our first piece with her was a Justin Peck vehicle, and
that was it was a Fall for Dance commission, right?
Yeah, it was a Fall for Dance, yeah. And it was a duet, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so we really got to work pretty one-on-one with her, since the focus was, what is she wearing? You know, she was basically the focus of that piece.
Yeah.
And I remember we created something, it was kind of our first foray into like athleisure type costumes. It was more sport like athletic than we're used to designing. But people loved it, and she looked great.
Well, I have to say, like, looking back on photos, that costume kind of like taught us how to make a leotard in a weird way, because we tried so many times. Like, that was truly trial and error.
Like, she tried on many versions of things.
Like, we started out with like this kind of like block of a thing that we drew on to like figured out. We didn't really know how to do the finishings. It was very sort of complicated. We were using the wrong fabrics. And after making many leotards, we finally arrived at something. And then when the piece got reprised for Jacob's Pillow, we made it even better. Like, we had to then like take a year away from it to then really know how to make it. It's
hard to make a Leo.
It was really hard. Yeah, we got better.
And I remember that pattern looking folded, cut, just so many alterations. Yeah, I do remember that. And
it was good. It was good to have like the pressure of like, oh, this is a white leotard that's going on Sara Mearns. Like, it needs to work.
And we had to work with Sara, who knows her body, who knows what she likes to wear. I remember a high leg line being so important to her. So, you know, it wasn't just a Capezio leotard that, you know, maybe that would have been maybe a little bit easier, but we had to create something that she could really move in freely. Also, she needs full, complete freedom, but also have these little, you know, details that she prefers, and that works. I think work for her.
Yeah.
You know, I feel like as a viewer, it's really easy to take for granted the actual complexity of form-fitting things. I don't know
Yeah.
if that makes sense, but I feel like if you're not somebody who's actually making it, like you, in your mind, you're like, well, you just make it so it fits and tight and it works. You know what I mean? But now it's much more complicated.
Well, yeah. I mean, if you look at like a bathing suit or a bodysuit, often there are ways that they fit that are, it's like kind of uncomplicated, but for dance, because there's this like mandate that it like stay below the butt cheek, and it like,
Yeah.
it doesn't have too much space in it, you know, like there's so many things to consider and so many tricks of construction to make it like sit flat.
Yeah. And like people are potentially touching her or lifting her or move, you know, it's like all of those
Yeah.
interventions.
Oh, go ahead.
No, I didn't know.
Was rodeo after that? Was rodeo
Yeah.
okay, so and then it was another Justin Peck piece, rodeo, where we had to do another kind of sports leotard with the bare legs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that just led into a whole kind of series of clothes that we made for her in the context of mostly New York City ballet, right? So then it was Bright Motion, well, that came after, but also Rotunda more recently. And she's been in one of our works in process where we dressed her for a Christopher Williams piece, and
dressed her for
what else?
Benowitz's piece for the River to River Festival, which was just, I mean, it was one of our leotards.
Yeah, but what is interesting about Sara that has taught, well, I think Harriet is more intuitive, and when it comes to women's proportion and like what's going to look good on a particular kind of shape of person, Harriet generally has like a more powerful sense. And I think that is inherent to female designers often, where they like women design for themselves. And sometimes male designers design for Barbie dolls.
Madonna.
You know what I mean? Exactly.
They're like Madonna.
Yeah. And what's been interesting about Sara is that I think that people probably have expectations that because there's such amplitude to her dancing and to her kind of like stage persona that like you can put a lot on her, but you really, the less you put on Sara, the more she reads, and kind of the more clarity there is to her proportions and her dancing. And that is something that we learned very quickly, like do less. And like almost like if you put the tiniest white leotard on Sara, you'll get the clearest result.
I'm just laughing because I'm like thinking about this particular collaboration and some of the ideas that we've been talking about, which is, we're definitely not talking about that.
Well, we're talking about both, I think.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah.
Because you're talking about shifting perspectives, and I think in what we're talking about in terms of obscuring the body, it'll definitely be a huge shift in how people perceive the ballet dancing body, or particularly Sara Mearns' dancing body, and then moving into something much more revealing.
I came to you guys with the idea or the desire of choosing a silhouette that is not form-fitting and that does really obscure, and maybe even I'm like trying to understand all of my intentions, but maybe even sort of like unify her body, like take some of the like ballet segmentation of like arm, leg, you know, like all, like everything, not like totally sack land, but I feel like that's the general kind of area that we were starting to talk about. But I think we talked about the geode I mean, maybe, is that too specific? I don't know, but I mean, I think the idea, I'm like, I was interested in something like, we were interested in some sort of transformation over the course of the solo, and that where we start is a place that where she's encased in some capacity.
Right. Sort of like a disappearing of this body, but also like a disappearing of expectation, audience expectation in a way, where like spectators are coming to this show. I'm assuming there's an expectation that like they're in the presence of a particular body for an hour and a half. And so then to disappear that body would sort of subvert expectation, or yeah, I think it would create some disorientation.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think actually like one of the places that I started with Sara was really trying to get that initial moment. And it wasn't really work in terms of like some of the material that I started trying to make on her. I remember we were working with this like I just had her like kind of hunched over and like draped and like sort of like, you know, like she wasn't making those sounds, but it was like very slow and animalistic and like, and by the end of the rehearsal, I was like, this isn't working. But it was me trying to kind of like figure out, yeah, what is that initial location, an unexpected place.
I'm going to take a little step back to say that the project that the three of us worked on a few years ago, when Eiko Otake had that dance space thing that you were a part of, did Eiko curate you as a part of the thing?
Yeah.
Right. Why am I calling it a thing? What should I call it?
It was a thing. It was, well, she had the platform, and this was one evening where she curated myself and a series and a group of dancers to essentially bring some solo material that we had each created, and we would inhabit different parts of the church, and then Eiko, and it would be durational. I think it lasted like maybe 3 hours, something like that. Maybe it was, yeah. And Eiko would also be a part. Like she would kind of come in and deal with and interact with all of us.
Oh, interesting. Because Harriet, you didn't get to see it, and I didn't get to see it. Is that true?
We weren't able to.
We were away, yeah. But in a sense, we were doing something conceptually similar, which was we were kind of trying to disappear you into the space.
Right.
Because you came to us and you said, I want to look like the carpet at St. Mark's Church.
Yeah, I ended up becoming a carpet monster. Yeah, I wanted to just like become this beige, slow moving thing that was just like working its way circularly around like the carpet of the main space.
Right. And
it was great. Like the best workout. I mean, I'm like quite lazy. It was like the best workout I've ever had, like doing that durational piece.
3 hours of rolling around?
Yeah, kind of, I think.
Oh.
Wow. I'm really sad I missed it.
Oh, that costume was so good. So good.
Harriet, your memory's better than mine, but what was the process of making that costume?
I don't remember how we found that fabric. I don't know how we got there, but I do remember taking a lot of time to make it dirty.
To make it the right color.
Yeah, make it gray, because it was dirty. It was, you know, I remember watering down black dye and spraying it and just trying to get it more dingy. I don't know if we ever really nailed the exact color, but
I think it's good. I wish I had.
Pretty good.
I wish I had a picture on my desktop that I could switch to, but
It's okay.
there's a couple of good pictures, and it was
There's definitely a picture of you in our Instagram wearing that. But
yeah.
I think the fabric was like this very heavy, like low pile sort of teddy bear
Yes.
fabric.
Yes.
And I remember it came in like a yellowy beige and like a pinky beige. And then we like opted for maybe the yellowier one, but like it just was like that shade of filthy at St. Mark's Church was like impossible to duplicate without like hand patina-ing the weird costume.
Yeah.
Which was, I mean, in the end, I feel very proud.
Yeah, and I love the silhouette on you. It was a fun costume.
Yeah, it was
Beth,
good.
where is that costume in your closet? Where is it?
It's in my storage space.
Oh, you have a storage. Wow.
Yeah, I have storage space with a bunch of crap, because that's what happens when you make dances that have a bunch of stuff in them.
Well,
was that
carpet
piece before or after quadrille, Pam's quadrille, where we did the carpet again?
Before.
Before.
Yeah, I guess we work in rugs a lot. But that I don't know, I don't want to go too long. We have maybe 10 more minutes, but you have a storage unit full of stuff, but really I would say a lot of it is treasure, because I've been so inspired by the work that Bailey Yonkman has done for you. And I can't say that, I mean, there are a handful of costume designers who I've like find really inspiring, but Bailey has really like set a bar for like the possibilities of like beauty and concept in kind of our universe of modern dance. And I would love for you to talk about your relationship with Bailey.
That was such an amazing, wonderful intro, and thank you for just contextualizing her in that way. I feel very similarly about Bailey. I think she is kind of a magical being, and has such is just really committed on a personal level. Like, a lot of our correspondence will happen just over our text chain over years of just sending images back and forth to each other. And it just really reinforces for me the way that she brings her artistry, her eye, her love of things like into her everyday. Like, she's always kind of looking, she's always searching. But yeah, Bailey and I were introduced by Stuart Singer, a dancer that I worked with. And that was at the time that I was making Catacomb, which was a performance that happened at the Chocolate Factory. And so we worked together for the first time for that piece. And I loved working with Bailey so much. I love the way that she really, what do I want to say about her? I feel like there's actually a parallel that I've experienced in working with her, and then also working with John Maniaci, who's a composer I've worked with for many years, and that they both tend to initially anchor themselves in these more like fundamental spaces inside of their media. Like, John, a lot of the time, will be trying to figure out the instrumentation in terms of like, what instruments am I working with? And a lot of times with Bailey, I feel like she's going to color a lot of the time. Or color is extremely important to her. And I feel like she's doing some kind of matching and understanding of the people and the universes around those people that we're making, and like kind of anchoring them through color. And then I, especially with Bailey, really love the way she's thinking about, I feel like then she tends to go to texture. And then I feel like a lot of the time silhouette is almost like the last thing that gets kind of like worked out, and it gets worked out like in a kind of process through fittings and layerings and all this other kind of stuff. And there's a lot of emotion and feeling that I find getting packed into what she's doing. After Catacomb, I kind of made this leap with Bailey where I had done some improvisations in the studio with some clothing and pitched this idea of basically like a molting dance where like somebody was working through many layers of clothes. And so we then started to work on Danielle's solo from Brand New Sidewalk. And that was like the first kind of that, and then also Maggie's solo, and that was Bailey's idea that she brought to the table, which was a different kind of like falling apart or molting over the course of the piece. And I feel like Brand New Sidewalk brought Bailey and I into more of a really like hands-on and kind of continuous collaboration over the course of the piece, where I was really working in the studio with what she was giving me. And then I feel like with Pick and Grove, we just kind of doubled down on that even more. And I came to her with this vision where I was like, I like saw this imagery of this like pastoral space that has these like mounds, and underneath it is like a hoarder's space. And like that, initially that's like kind of what we talked about. And then it, of course it changes over time. But the idea was that like this pastoral top layer kind of comes off and it's just like trash and stuff. And, you know, I'm not sure that that's ultimately what that section ended up being, but, you know, we both selected all of the materials for that piece. And, you know, Bailey was kind of in it with me, like for the whole run, which was really amazing. And it's like amazing to, you know, like, you know, there's this, the way that Danielle's section like starts in that piece, sorry, this is like too specific, but like Danielle ends up taking this plastic, like this deli plastic bag, and like puts it to her mouth and like blows air into it, and it like inflates. And it was always that bag, like that was a bag that Bailey brought to me from her house because she loved that bag. So there's like, I'm just saying that because like she's an amazing person who has that kind of deep relationship with stuff.
Yeah, the relationship to material is very clear, and the way that the costumes are so integral to the movement of the piece and to this like story of the piece. It's very clear that Bailey's very much like ingratiated in the process, which is so great. Anyways, for the people who are listening, have no idea what we're talking about. We're talking about 3 different pieces called Catacomb, Pick and Grove, and Brand New Sidewalk. And is there, I mean, you can find images online, but is there video online, Beth?
Catacomb is online on Vimeo, and I kind of think there's probably video of all 3. You can go to my Vimeo site.
I highly, you know, not all dance work is worth watching on video, but Beth Gill's work I'd recommend. Anyways, before we wrap up, as we're moving into a entirely new universe, because there's a plague, and because we all have to now take on greater responsibility for community, for other people, for taking care of one another, for making sure, you know, the government changes, etc. What are some thoughts for you, Harriet? I'm curious for both of us actually, but do you have any thoughts about moving into the future? Because, you know, we don't have really a lot of jobs coming up, but we do have a lot of time to reconsider our practice. And I was wondering if you had some thoughts.
For me, I feel like most of it is me just sitting in this like feeling of like we didn't do enough, you know, because we do also have a platform, and no, not the most power, but we, you know, we work in dance and we do have some we had opportunities, I think, to do more. And that's kind of where I'm at, where I'm like, didn't do enough. And how do we like change that? How do we, and I don't have answers. That's kind of where I've been
Right.
past like months, is just like, how do I not continue to do that? Yeah.
I love it. Same. I mean, whatever small amount of resources and influence we have, we can hopefully be more mindful moving forward to do better.
Yeah.
And, you know, as Beth said, like move into a place of greater abundance and multiplicity, you know, for everybody. And Beth, how is this all affecting your thoughts, either towards the work you're doing for Sara or just in general in your practice?
Yeah. Well, thank you for initiating that. I think the work of interrogating my whiteness, and as such my privilege and my power in the world has been in like, and I'm embarrassed to say this, but has been like slowly kind of growing in my consciousness over a number of years, but certainly this moment right now, the Black Lives Matter social uprising that is happening, feels like a much needed push to activate a more explicit and deeper commitment to that cause. So I guess what that means for me is, like Harriet, I think I'm doing a lot of reflection on my work and the ways in which my work is not challenging like the legacy of white supremacy, or is participating in that tradition. I'm really trying to take the time that is demanded to really think through all of this. And so I do feel like I'm mostly anchored in a reflective space, which is to say that I don't have answers that feel good or solid for me about exactly how to move forward. Because a lot of the work that I'm trying to figure out, and, you know, especially my process in the work that I make is not at all like set up inside of a democratic process to begin with. Like I really take on a very clear position of authorship and like sole authorship and power. Although I work in deep collaboration with people, I don't know. So there are ways that I'm like really trying to think about both the content of what I make and the process in terms of how I make it, and how are both of those spaces places that are upholding values and principles and practices that are not good for all people. I don't know, but that's where I'm starting right now. And I'm really, there's no part of my life right now where this questioning isn't like taking place or moving into. So I feel committed to bringing this into my work with Sara in some capacity. For me, when I think about Sara, I go to my dance roots, which is ballet. And I think about what it was like to be a young girl, literally growing up inside of ballet culture, and how that shaped me, and the way in which ballet carries a tradition of colonizing. Like it literally, and so how devoted and just like signed on to that process I was, and how willing I was to kind of be a part of that. And to this day, how incredibly difficult it is to separate myself from some of those values and ideas about like achievement and being good, being the best, and like what it takes to partake in all of those things. There's a lot there, and I don't at all assume that I can take on the whole, but I'm already committed to kind of opening more spaces to sort of talk about these things.
Right. Yeah. I'm also feeling like newly committed to trying to step away from a lot of these very narrow ideas that are so deeply inside me from my life in ballet.
Yeah.
And, it's hard to step away from ideas of like how things are supposed to look.
How we're
so,
yeah.
Exactly. So we're going to keep working on that. And, come to see Sara's show at the Joyce. Harriet and I designed a bunch of clothes for it, both, for the film, for the Cunningham event, which is the Cunningham event is really like a switch in many ways in when it happened for 100 solos, but even in this iteration, because to see Cunningham movement through such diverse bodies can really, I think, creates a lot of movement in history of dance. So, and I think this is the small group that Sara's put together in this version of the Cunningham event is a really nice cross section from that original cast. So yeah, I don't know what else to say. I think we've had quite a talk.
We've had quite a talk.
We never need moderators. You know how people are always asking us to get moderators? Why don't you just do the whole thing?
You're so good.
That's nice.
And speak.
Yeah, we're not going to have moderators anymore. Although we do, there's some we've loved. It is fun to just talk to people and fun for people to like just ask you questions about yourself. What was I going to say? One more thing. Beth, Harriet. I don't know. I think that we covered it. You guys support the Joyce Theater. Come to Sara's show. Costumes, modern dance.
Yay!
And fingers crossed that I actually recorded this.
Oh my god! Oh my god! That would be incredible.
It's good. I see the red dot.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
I'm signing off. I'm gonna go eat dinner.
Okay, well, Beth, it was a real pleasure to watch you, listen to Dinner Get Made and watch various points at which you became stop motion animation, which was tremendous.
Amazing. Perfect. Yeah. Thank you.
Bye, guys.
Bye.